many of you have ever found yourself in the awkward position of not really wanting to say something, but knowing that you have to? That's kind of where I am this morning. You'll see what I mean when I get there. But let me start this sermon by simply saying, no, I guess not saying, more quoting. A bunch of studies that have taken place at such honored institutions as Duke, Dartmouth, or Yale universities. You see, they have concluded that hospitalized people who never attended church had an average stay 3 times longer in the hospital than people who did attend regularly. Heart patients were 14 times more likely to die if they did not participate in a religious service or engage in regular prayer. Elderly people who never prayed had a stroke rate double that of elderly people who did. In Israel, religious people who also prayed had a 40% lower death rate from cardiovascular disease and cancer during the duration of the studies that were conducted. The publication Psychology Today also has concluded that there are at least 5 scientifically supported benefits to engaging in regular prayer. 2 years ago, this is what they said, that it improves your self-control. I like this one. It makes you nicer. Not sure how you measure that. They said that it makes you more forgiving. They said that it increases your trust in the relationships of which you are a part. And it said that it offsets the negative health effects due to stress in your life. Other studies have shown that people who pray and people who pray regularly are more optimistic, experience less depression, have less anxiety, and interestingly enough, have stronger immune systems. In fact, according to Newsmax, people who pray, in an analysis of more than 1,500 studies, concluded that people who pray have better mental and better physical health. Got that? Okay, good, because we're going to stick that in our back pocket and bring it out later. But before I leave that too much, before I go too far afield of what I'm actually going to talk about here, let's just say that although we cannot exactly account for how or why those things are true, there does seem to be a verifiable healing aspect to prayer. And let me also forward then one further thought for us to consider today. And that is, if you enter the world of the Bible, while you will find different instances where people are praying for themselves or for someone else, I would actually posit the idea that or challenge you to go ahead and read through your Bible and to see whether or not I'm wrong about this, because I'm pretty sure that I'm right. Most of the time, when they offer up prayers for healing, especially in the Old Testament, it's not on behalf of an individual. It's on behalf of a people. It's on behalf of a nation. It's on behalf of the land. It's on behalf of the community. Now, all of this leads me to the text that was read from Malachi chapter 4 for today. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are Malachi scholars. I once had somebody come up to me and say, "Isn't that written in that great Italian prophet Malachi's book?" So I'm fairly certain that, well, Malachi is a minor prophet. Many of us may not be familiar with the context in which he was writing. So let's just say that the context goes something like this. The people of Israel in Malachi's day were a divided people. In Malachi's time, what had taken place was there were folks who had returned from captivity in Babylon and were ready to go and start being the faithful people of God in the land that God had promised after they had lost it and then regained it. But there were some people who never experienced the captivity, who after they were defeated by the Babylonians were left in the land. And those individuals did not feel the same urgency as the people who were coming back. Malachi would have been a contemporary of folks like Nehemiah, who had returned once again to be a free and an independent people, only to confront not an enemy from without, but a people who no longer thought the same way they did from within as they returned. As a result, the ones who were returning had a sense of hope in that they were getting out of slavery, but in part they also had a sense of struggle because of the disrepair of the land and the cities that they were returning to. And they had a sense of anxiety and depression when they were taking a look at the people to whom they were returning. And so in Malachi chapter 4, you can see some of those ideas that kind of bubble up and bubble out in that anxiety that existed between the people who were returning and the ones who had stayed. You could see it in the way that they talked about one another. They said things like, the arrogant and the evildoers should be reduced to stubble. Or that when that day comes, they should be burned up. And I found those words to be particularly poignant for us and relevant today. You see, I think that they're relevant because, while we may not use exactly the same words, I think that exactly the same emotion and exactly the same sentiment exist in our land today. After what we have just come through, with the election that is less than 1 week old, with protests in the streets of some of our cities, of which some have been peaceful, but where some have not. This is part of our present predicament. You see, it's not just in those streets that has taken place. I've listened to stories over the past week because of the contentiousness of the election that took place. I know 2 individuals who have been friends for over 50 years, who as a result of this election have not only unfriended each other on Facebook, but have unfriended each other in life. I know of a couple of people who are in school together, who are roommates, who live in the same apartment, who haven't spoken to each other since Tuesday. Actually, the press reports that a full 7% of the American population says that over this last election they've lost a friend. And in households that have marriages, where one spouse voted one way and one spouse voted the other, a full 41% of those marriages have reported that they have had a fight about this election that lasted for longer than 2 days. So the language that's in Malachi about the arrogant and the evildoers and the being reduced to stubble and burning people up is exactly the same type of thing that I hear on newscasts. And exactly the type of thing that I read in published articles. And if you think it's bad there, take a look at social media. The arrogant and the evildoers reduced to stubble. Folks getting burnt up. I don't know about you guys. How many of y'all are tired of that kind of language in our country? Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to tell you who's right or who's wrong in this. I'm not going to tell you whether you need to get in line or who you need to support. I'm going to tell you that I believe that you ought to support what you believe and do it enthusiastically, but I'm also going to tell you that you need to do it respectfully. Because in our American system of politics, in which we say everyone has a civic duty, when did we believe that civic no longer included civil? I guess what I'm saying right here is that we are a divided country. I would have been preaching this same sermon no matter who won. We're a divided country. Actually, it's nothing new. It's been building for years, from the Tea Party to Occupy Wall Street to Black Lives Matter to everything that you have in this election, with varied ideas on immigration and refugees and the Supreme Court and the budget and the debt. It's no wonder we're a divided people. But I want to focus on a different part of the text. There is that part of the text that reflects the mood that's out there, that part of reducing folks to stubble and burning them up. But I want you to know that that's not where the text ends for today. The text from Malachi doesn't stop with that. But it continues on and it says, "But as for you who revere my name," that would be all of us sitting in this room, because we wouldn't be here unless we revered God's name. And so it says, "But as for you who revere my name," this Malachi, who's living in a time of a divided people, states quite clearly and quite overtly that the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings. Don't you think that that's different than that stubble and burning up language that we had before? The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, because we can be one people with folks with whom we disagree. But we cannot be one people with folks that we demonize. We can be one with people with whom we have different ideas. As means of an example, I have friends that are Catholics. Do any of you? I have friends that are Baptists. Do any of you? I have friends that are Presbyterians. Do any of you? But how many of you agree we're all Christians? Do we have different ideas? But are we one? All right, so let me see if I can put it this way. I have friends that are Republicans. Do you? I have friends that are Democrats. Do you? I have friends that are Libertarians. Do you? I'm not really sure if I have any friends that are of the Green Party. But I could be friends with them too. Couldn't you? because we're all Americans. So certainly we could all be one. And when the Bible talks about praying for healing, it does talk about it sometimes as praying for healing with an individual, but especially in the Old Testament, when it talks about it, it usually talks about it as being for a people, for being for a land, for being for a nation, for being for community. I guess what I'm saying is, if we are going to stand, then we have to stand together. Or let me say it another way. A nation divided against itself cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln said that. Incidentally, he got the idea from the Bible. So, if I started this sermon by talking about the healing power of the gift of prayer, it's because I believe that we need to have the Son of Righteousness that will rise and will have healing in its wings. And one of the gifts that we have in prayer is the ability to be able to pray for healing, not just for an individual, but for our land. So the reason that I started out talking about the verifiable effects of healing through prayer is because I'm going to now encourage us to be a part of what is healing in the wings. You see, God promises a new day with the Son of Righteousness, and God promises healing in the wings, and God has given us the gift of prayer. And we have studied prayer, and we have engaged in prayer, and we know that prayer works. That prayer is efficacious, that prayer heals. And we also know that the Bible most often tells us that prayer is on behalf of the group, of the community, of the nation. So, church, let me tell you what. It's time for us to get on our knees and off of our Facebooks. It's time for us to get on our knees, because it's a lot easier to be humble and a lot harder to be arrogant when you're in that posture. It's time for us to pray for our leaders as much as we criticize or as much as we praise them. It's time for us to recognize that the party that's in power or the party that's out of power is not going to be the power that heals us. But the power that heals us is available to us when we're on our knees. It's time for us to get on our knees as the ones who revere God's name. Because I don't know about y'all, I think that we need Him and we need that power of prayer and we need that healing as much now as I can ever remember. People who stand at podiums, myself included, will not be the ones who heal this land. People who get on their knees will be the ones who have the opportunity of being able to do that. Because once we get on our knees, what did I say before? It will give you more self-control. It will make you nicer. It will make you more forgiving. It will increase your trust in your relationships. And those are exactly the kinds of things we need in order to have a healed land. So, if you swallowed hard, no matter what side you were on, and cast your vote last Tuesday because you wanted to fulfill your civic duty, then I would tell you today it's time for you to get on your knees and fulfill your spiritual duty. And if we do that, then God will again lead us beside green pastures and still waters. And God will again lead us in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings.